In this lesson, I'll teach you comping and soloing in Little Sunflower by Freddie Hubbard. It's a classic example of a modal tune that brings together chords from the minor and major families, and will have you improvising in 3 key centers. And that's important because you need to be able to do that if you want to play jazz. I'm Saul Richardson, and this is Comping and Soloing in Little Sunflower. Little Sunflower was written by the great and wonderful Freddie Hubbard. It was first released on the 1967 album Backlash. Hubbard also played on another version titled Sunflower in a 1972 session led by vibraphonist Milt Jackson. That version is in a more jazz rock vein, and it's simply terrific if you can get past the, to me, distracting string parts by Don Sebesky. Those parts seem heavy-handed and quite dated, but the playing on both versions is brilliant and absolutely worth listening to. If you want to learn the head of Little Sunflower, I've linked a couple of good lessons in the description below. Today, our main objectives are for you to combine 2 chord families and 3 key centers into one tune for comping and soloing. If you're not familiar with chord families or interactive comping in each of the big 3 chord families, watch my other comping videos first. This lesson assumes that knowledge. Links are in the description. Following this lesson, we'll expand into 3 and more chord families. But today, the basic chords are D minor 7, E flat major 7, and D major 7, in that order. The lesson will look at comping and soloing for each chord type and each key center, and we'll conclude by bringing it all together so you can comp and solo over complete choruses of Little Sunflower, as an example of combining chord families and key centers. Here's the head and chord progression of Little Sunflower. I'll focus on what on guitar we often just call 5th string root chord shapes or positions. We'll start with basic chord shapes, and then using the approach from my game-changing approach to comping videos, we'll elaborate on them to help you develop interactive comping with melodic voice leading and rhythmic variety. The first chord in Little Sunflower is a D minor 7 that lasts for the whole 16 bars or measures of the repeated A section. This doesn't mean to literally play just a D minor 7 chord for 16 bars. Unless you're playing the tune in a very strict funk or pop style where little variation in chord voicings is appropriate, you need to use voice leading to create the movement and variety that's characteristic of conventional jazz guitar playing. Use the voice leading scale based around the D Dorian mode on the first 3 strings of the guitar. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please go and watch the minor family comping video before you do this lesson. Here's the voice leading scale. And here's an example of comping. Now you practice doing it first, just by yourself over a backing track. If you like, you can imagine that you're accompanying a soloist, but we'll get to that later. Again, if you want more or deeper practice on that, go to the minor chord family video. When you comp in this manner, you're using the D Dorian scale to improvise the voice leading in real time as you play. Similarly, to solo over this part of Little Sunflower, or any other tune with a minor 7 chord that lasts more than a couple of bars or measures, you can also use the Dorian. When I say use the Dorian, I mean improvise melodies and rhythms that are in time with the backing and seem to fit the style and mood of the tune or the chords. Here are some examples. I'm going to try to keep my playing fairly simple, but I want to avoid much, if any, repetition of long notes, because that doesn't seem to be part of the style, or even a thing that jazz musicians tend to do when they improvise. Here's me improvising a bit using the D Dorian. Okay, and now you take a turn improvising using the notes from the D Dorian. I'll play the chords for you. Take 16 measures. Repeat this bit if you want more. So that's the A section of Little Sunflower. But now let's get to the best bit, the bridge or B section. This section moves between E flat major 7 and D major 7, 4 measures of each, and repeats for a total of 16 measures or bars. Once again, the chord symbol E flat major 7 doesn't mean you only play that one chord. It means that the improvised comping over those 4 bars is drawn from the E flat major chord family and the voice leading within that family. Also, the melody of the tune uses not just an ordinary major scale, but a Lydian, which is a major with the 4th degree sharpened. However, that sharp 4 is there in the melody, whether or not you play it in your chords. You can include it, but you don't have to worry about it. The chords on the lead sheet don't mention it. It's just up to you. Anyway, our starting point here is the E flat major 7 chord, 5th string root shape. If you haven't watched my major family comping video, and to be honest, not that many of you have, now might be a good time. Link is in the description. The voice leading for this is based around the major scale on the first 3 strings. Here's the voice leading scale. Remember, the sharp 4 is only there for a couple of fractions of a second during the head. Don't obsess over it, it's not that important. Another way of dealing with a potential clash is to simply leave out the 4th from your comping, which is often a good idea anyway. The chord changes to a D major 7, and when that happens, you do the same thing. 5th string root voicing of a D major 7 using the major voice leading pattern. Here's an example of me comping over the B section of Little Sunflower. Now your turn with a backing track. And to solo over the bridge, you can use major scales, Lydians, or a combination of both. As well as those scales, you could also choose to use major blues or major pentatonic scales for a very different sound. I won't go through those now, but there's something that you could try. Here are some very quick examples of lines using the Lydian and major sound over the bridge of Little Sunflower. You solo while I comp. Okay, so now let's look very quickly at transitioning from one chord to another. It often sounds really good if you can make the voice leading flow from one chord to the next with as little difference between the top voices as possible. For example, this way of moving between E flat major 7 and D major 7. Or this way of moving from D major 7 to D minor 7. That's not the only way to change chords, but it's an approach that's often effective and appreciated. You should practice a variety of different ways of moving from one chord to another so that you're equipped to play whatever your creativity leads you to play or whatever is required in any given situation. Having looked at the parts of Little Sunflower, let's put it together and play it all the way through. There'll be a backing track. The first chorus is for you to practice comping and voice leading. There won't be any chords in the backing for that chorus, just bass and drums. The second chorus is for you to practice soloing. There will be chords in the backing for that chorus. Repeat it as you need, and feel free to solo on the chordless first chorus too. And here it is. Okay, so that's Little Sunflower, an example of a tune combining 2 chord families and 3 key centers. Some other similar tunes you might look at are So What, Impressions, Cantaloupe Island, and the original Milestones.